Certainly we've been referring repeatedly to the general ICT area, and that is clearly an area where our country's fortunes are so aligned and where we need to make sure that our system, all the way up from primary through secondary, through third level, through fourth level, that we have our story straight and that we have our act together in a unified and consistent way, involving industry, involving education, involving all the stakeholders. There are lots of creative ways that we can respond to this. I was talking last night to Mark Gantley of HP in Galway. He has lovely initiatives going on with regard to mentoring of transition year students in business development, in software engineering. Industry has a very significant role to play along with the third level education system and the higher education system. So we have, again, in the council, we have a number of schemes that work very, very closely with industry. We can come in a very agile and focused way. We can identify with our enterprise partners particular skills deficits, work with them to start research programs, to put them in contact with scholars, research groups within the universities in order to make positive things happen. So I think that we have to, we are, one of our characteristics, one of our strengths as a country is that we are a small country. We are responsive, we are flexible, we are agile. Most people within an industry can get to know one another pretty quickly in a country of our size. And I think that we need to pull all these various stakeholders together to develop innovative, flexible, smart solutions to these things. I think that we can do it, and I think there's an awful lot happening on the ground that shows that we are doing it.
Well, there's two main skills gaps that are very evident, and a lot of the proponents of telling the story nationally or in the audience or even on the stage. One is the ICT, but broader STEM education problem. That's the fundamental problem. And the second one is, as Louise Phelan from PayPal would often tell us, is the languages problem. And let me take both of those. In the ICT space, we know in the morning that we could probably double the intake of our graduates from a capacity perspective. But once you hit a certain points level, in terms of particularly maths ability, there's no point. Those students will not survive. So there's a systemic issue in terms of maths education in Ireland. And I don't mean to be negative about it, but I think it's well established and it's multifaceted. And it needs, and I agree very much with what Orla said, it needs a multifaceted approach. And a lot of this is about enterprise partnership, academic enterprise partnership. So for example, Sean O'Sullivan in the audience from Ovigo is a strong proponent of the Cannon Academy approach, this flipped classroom idea where students can actually use these 10-minute videos of learning math skills outside the class and then free up the teacher to be much more personalised and engaged with the students in terms of conceptual ideas. And we're about to run a pilot of that in both primary and secondary schools in the country to get this in as an augmentation of the role of the teacher itself. Last year in the States, Barack Obama brought together a round table of leaders of enterprise to address this very issue. And I think the CEO of Accenture, CEO of Intel, and all were there, and they agreed to actually form a major partnership to try and address this. It's about CPD for teachers, it's about new programs, it's about new technologies like the one I've just described. And I think that's the way we're going to have to do it, because the government just basically can't fund what needs to be done at the moment in those spaces. But it's fundamental to the future of engineering, the future of ICT in Ireland. If we don't get that right, we've got a major problem.
Well, I think, first of all, it starts at primary school. I think it starts when kids are very young and when their minds are completely open. This is true for languages as well, by the way. My kids went to a Gael school, happened to go to a Gael school, and in a very short space of time, they learned to speak Irish. Now, they couldn't write a word of it, and they didn't know Irish grammar, but they could speak the language. So language is, first and foremost, about speaking and interaction. And I think if you can get young children interested, then it's, I have 2 boys and a girl, and there is a difference. There's a difference between the two genders, and can you get girls equally interested in experimentation and sort of getting involved in science and technology at a young age? Because I think when you influence children at a young age, it goes forward. In second level then, I mean, I'm a Vice President of Engineers Ireland, Orla would know this, and I went for that role to become President of Engineers Ireland because I think you need role models. You need to get out to children and influence them. You also need to influence the parents in choices because they are sitting behind them, telling them. And I was joking with Anne O'D, but I do think there's something in this in terms of soap operas, right? There's The Good Wife, and there's ER, and there's CSI, and there's all these things. And people have an understanding, younger people, of what those jobs are, what they're entailed, and they look exciting, and they look like things that people want to be. Most people outside of our sector, for sure, have no concept of what is involved in it. What will I be doing? And that seems like at a very base level. So we have to, as an industry, we have through IBEC, ICT Ireland, which is all the multinational companies, through ISA, all the indigenous companies, we're trying to get this Smart Futures campaign out there and to go through Facebook, Twitter, to get people to understand, how wonderful a career can be and kind of what you'll be doing and what value you'll be bringing, and the fact that it can be creative and inventive and it's fun.
Project Maths is yet unproven. I think it's a culture shift. Just for those not immersed in it, it's a very new way of teaching maths and a new focus on a kind of much more applicable and problem-solving approach to it. So the principles of Project Maths, I think, are admirable, and it's trying to get away from the rote learning approach to mathematics, for example. But it is challenging for teachers, particularly, for example, there's something like 40% of maths teachers in the country are so-called out-of-field maths teachers, that they're teachers who are not educated to degree level in mathematics, for example. But I think it's too early to make a conclusion on its impact. It was piloted, I think, 2 years ago in something like 24, 25 schools. It's now being rolled out to all schools. And I think in fairness to it, and in fairness to the engagement with it, both at school level and at Department of Education and skills level, we should wait and see what the data shows, and I'd very much like to take an evidence-based approach to it. I know I talk to a lot of maths teachers because of my interest in STEM education. A lot of them are scared about it. A lot of them are staying up late at night trying to get ahead of the actual topic itself, because it's a completely new way of teaching and learning. And it's one of the reasons why we're looking at augmentation approaches like the Cannon Academy and other technology-enhanced learning approaches that might assist the teachers in actually coming to grips with this.
Sorry, can I ask you though, Breen, do you think, even though you're waiting for the evidence, but is there a danger that it won't prepare students as well in understanding maths?
I think it's much more likely to prepare students better in terms of understanding. If I can give you one example, my daughter was doing the Junior Cert a few years ago, and one of these radio programs which brings on expert teachers in the weeks leading up to Junior Cert to give advice, and my daughter was a little bit worried about maths, and I said, well, listen to this program and see what the experts say. And this kid phoned in and she said, I don't understand this log A over B is equal to log A minus log B, which is, a fairly basic fundamental principle in maths. And the expert teacher said, don't worry about understanding it, just learn it off. And I said, so it's to get away from that and to get kind of more familiarity with maths by application, and there's no better way of understanding that. And I think, Niamh, that's what I would feel about it. A lot of people are worried about it, but I think the jury should be out at this stage.
Well, I think that to get students more engaged is absolutely laudable and essential aim for our country. So I think that's great. It's great that so many of our best mathematical minds in the country were engaged in this mission, and there are very, very strong arguments on both sides. I'll see them coming through our engineering programs in a few years' time. It is undoubtedly a concern for us. We need a certain level of facility with the basic tools of mathematics. If they come into us without a strong grounding in calculus, that is a big problem for us. We have an awful lot of then backfilling to do if they don't have the tools of the trade. So that is a problem, while the problem solving is greatly to be applauded. I went through as you would have done maths, the old school maths curriculum in Ireland, as most people here may have done. It was a very traditional old school curriculum, and yet for people like myself who love mathematics, many of my generation went on to build careers of creativity, of enterprise based on that springboard. So to engage with mathematics at its most fundamental, rigorous level for a certain type of student is a wonderful thing and can open all sorts of doors. A solution that might emerge a few years down the line is possibly to have 2 mathematics curricula at second level. to have a project maths to upskill our general population, to increase the problem-solving skills that we all regard as necessary, but to have a higher maths as well for those who are really going to run with mathematics and make it part of their lives.
I'd start with the Leaving Cert, where assessment goes, curriculum follows. So if we got out of this learning by rote process, we got out of people learning off the answer as opposed to thinking about it, have a critical problem solving skills, change the terminal exam, and that will filter backwards.
I would say start with the very young children, because ideas form. You know, I mean, I have my youngest is 7, and ideas form, you know, opinions start forming, you know, very early on, and stereotypes get formed in children's heads very early on. So I would say my one thing would be go right back to have a continuum of education that's more joined up, but start with the youngest children.
I think the solution has to be a multifaceted one. We have a lot of very useful initiatives popping up here and there in the landscape, but there's no overarching strategy and framework around this. So I would like some formal strategy to bring the various actors in this together to see how we can put our heads together to deliver the solution. So bringing the people together to come up with creative solutions.
I would, number one, in terms of entrepreneurship, I think I'd build a coherent strategy for entrepreneurship right along the education continuum from primary school all the way through. Kids love it and will embrace it. And secondly, in terms of maths, I would change the whole modality of maths learning and develop, for the next 5 years, for the austerity trough that we're in, an industry academic partnership to address just a range of initiatives across primary, secondary level.